We are back at it, racing it again in Portugal. This time it's a UCI 1.2 race called Classica de Arrabida. This race it had a fair amount of hills in the start and the middle section, and then towards the end was where the hills really got serious, and there was a couple, 2 or 3, some pretty hard climbs. But as you can see by the string of riders in front of us, it wasn't as simple as hills because there was some serious crosswinds involved. Now, to run you up to speed with where we are in the race now, 120 kilometers in, out of 180, including the neutralised section. The race had absolutely been torn to shreds in the crosswinds earlier on. About 15 guys made the front split. I was actually in the split until I got flicked out the back. Slightly suboptimal positioning. Here, took a bottle from the team, perfect little handout, flick the old bottle out, that'll get picked up by someone later. It's in the feed zone. But yeah, like I said, it was actually a really windy day, ended up being strung out like this for a large portion of the race. Yeah, very windy, and now we're in group 2 behind a front group of 15. The gap was about 50 seconds for a lot of it, and this group it's not massive, but maybe there was 40 to 50 riders, and then a whole load of groups behind. But yeah, as you can see at this point, we're still absolutely romping along nearly 60k an hour here. Positioning in this race was super important, as it is with all windy races. The sort of elastic effect of a bunch as accelerations happen is exacerbated the further back you go, and that's especially true in the crosswinds. Anyway, we come here to the first of the hard climbs towards the end of the race. The last 2 were sort of one climb, but this is sort of the main selection point. I was pretty tired by this point. I actually went max to try and stay in that front echelon, and it wasn't to be. So yeah, trying to stay with the skinny climbers, tried to cling on, but also, not blow myself up. And I was just on the limit. And as you can see, the gap just slowly went out. Came around a couple of riders, and if I'd heeded my own advice and started the climb at the very front, then maybe I would have had a chance. But as you can see, doing like 520 watts, still going backwards. And at that point, I'm like, okay, I can't. You go much higher than that, and it's like, okay, I'm going to blow myself up. So settling into a more reasonable tempo for the climb. I think it was, I can't remember how many minutes, something like 4 to 5 minutes. But long story short, didn't make that front group, and eventually I had to settle into what would become the new group 2, because the front guys from this group actually made it across to that front echelon I spoke about earlier. And that would be the group that would go on to fight for the win in the race. And sadly, that was me out of contention. My teammate Joao, he's just coming past me here, I think. He was climbing really well and actually very nearly made it back up to that front group. I think if he'd started a little bit further up, he probably would have made it. So yeah, he had some good legs. I just did an acceleration there because my chain very briefly got jammed with some chain suck, but that certainly wasn't the excuse today. And yeah, long story short, ended up getting to the top with a small group that eventually swelled with some other riders who came back. And yeah, that was pretty much it. We were sort of chasing for a while, but it was obviously all the strongest guys were up ahead. Whenever I'm trying to do work in a group, I always try and get to the front for a descent, or if there's a technical section, because normally being a bigger rider means that I can usually find it a bit easier going harder on the descents, or faster on the descents, I should say. But yeah, like I said, after a little while, the impetus in our group 2 waned a little bit, I think largely because we were all pretty tired, and the front group was motoring, as you would expect. So coming into the first part of the last climb, it was a bit of a double header. There were some rolling roads in between, but we'll call them 2 climbs for now. Despite being group 2, the pace is still pretty hot actually. I was a bit surprised on this first section. I was still having to do 500 watts for a little bit and come around some guys, but yeah, I think it whittled down the group a little bit. But yeah, it was still, it's a tricky one. Like, we're still racing, but it's yeah, we're fighting for, I think, something like 30th place or something like that. It's super easy to forget, but even in a small group of 20, having a good position coming into a steep climb like this, it's actually like, 20 guys, at least 20 meters, 30 meters maybe. And that's a huge difference in time. If you think about like 5 seconds on a 4-minute climb, I mean, it's not a huge amount, but it's not nothing. Anyway, we start this final steep ascent. It started raining. Bit of pathetic fallacy there, as we're all suffering towards the end of this 4+ hour race. And this was one of those ones where it was more the muscular fatigue from just being on the pedals in the wind all day. So I was really feeling it in the legs more than the cardiovascular system. But yeah, I was just about managed to cling on really. And then, well, towards the top, I sort of felt a bit better. You know, that when you see that crest, it all feels good. Anyway, on to the descent. It was wet, and I thought, yeah, I'll just chill out at the back and wait till we get to the finish, which was pretty much not far from the bottom of the descent. But the gaps actually started opening up a lot, like much more than I thought. There was a lot of hesitation in the descent because obviously of the wet roads. And you know, I'm not a massive risk taker on the descent. I'm usually pretty erring on the side of caution, but I knew there was a lot more. There was a lot more in the road than these guys were giving caution to. So I had to come past a few guys on the descent and realise there was actually like some pretty big gaps opening up ahead. So got my head down a bit, got aero, tried to take some decent lines and catch up to a couple guys, which ended up sort of forming a new smaller group of maybe 6 guys. Well, it started with 3, ended up being 6 guys. And then from there it was, I don't know, like 4k to the finish, not far at all, just a little tiny berg, but that wasn't really that significant in the end. I was a little annoyed I didn't take this corner that well. I had to brake quite a bit too much, or more than I'd have liked, because the line was not optimal. But yeah, still a little acceleration to catch up with these 2 guys ahead of me. And then, yeah, like I said, it was fairly straightforward up this last little berg and then down to the finish. This lighter rider was giving us a nice bit of impetus in the climbs. That just meant we got to the finish a little bit easier. But he was setting a nice tempo, so I guess none of the guys behind, or less of the guys behind, caught back up again. So then, coming on the descent, I thought, you know, let's just take these, I mean, they're hardly corners, but I thought I'll take an aero, take them a little bit quick, and see what happens. And I looked behind, and there was a little gap. There was a little gap, and I flicked the elbow, well, there was one guy, and then a little gap, but I was sort of, you know, when you're not sure if you want to really just, like, hammer it. Anyway, this guy was sure, because he came past, he saw the gap, and he hammered it. So, had to do a little acceleration to get on his wheel, and I was really tempted to just whack it from there. I think it's like 2k to go from the top of this hill, so really not that far. And it's one of those things, it's actually, when you're not fighting for something like a win or whatever, it's really good to use these opportunities to actually take those risks that you might not normally take, just see how they feel, get used to them. So that's one regret, where I think it would have been nice to just try it out, see what happens, but I didn't do that. I thought I'd play it safe. For a sprint, I'm using air quotes because, you know, we're sprinting for like 35th, so, you know, I don't want to big it up more than it is, but, you know, you still have to, I think it's good to treat these situations like an actual race situation. So I think we just, around about a k to go, this guy is leading out. I don't think he's too fussed about the result. He's actually the Pan American champion, so I've raced him at least once before, but yeah, like I said, I was in the drops. I was like, I'm ready for this. I'm gonna do a full gas sprint. Just come up here, you can just start to see the finish line, so you get a good gauge for how far it is. Now, if you look just on the left, in a minute, you'll see the shadow coming up. I saw this guy's shadow. I don't think he was even sprinting. He was just getting ready. I see the shadow. I'm like, I'm gone. I'm just gonna launch here. I think he actually started sprinting too. But I was like, yeah, let's go. You can see from my shadow, I had a quick look behind. There was a bit of a gap, and yeah, I'm not going to celebrate this one. I ended up 35th in the end. So, you know, not bad. Certainly not what I wanted. I really wanted to get at least a top 10 here. But you look at the results, and a lot of them are, you know, proper climbers. It certainly wasn't a sprinter's race, although the guy who won is kind of a sprinter. So, yeah, clearly a very strong rider. But anyway, I think the legs are good. I definitely wanted a bit more from the race, but still carrying some decent momentum, good form. And looking forward to next week, where we have the Volta Alentejo, which is 5 days. We've got 2 days recovery after this one. And yeah, looking forward to hopefully getting some more results there. If you like the video and want to see more, then drop us a subscribe. And that's all for this one. Thanks for watching.